right, welcome back to another episode of Phoenix Edge. This is an RPG and gaming news podcast. My name is Het.
And I'm Eric.
And today we are going to be talking about our thoughts with Square Enix. Are they out of touch? If they are out of touch, why are they out of touch? I know Eric does not have much to say on this topic at all.
No, never.
But, you know, we're going to do our best to try to get through this very minor topic. Then also, we have Octopath Traveler coming out next week. There's been some recent kind of early reviews saying that this game is not Final Fantasy VI. So unfortunately, we do not have one of the greatest games of all time coming out next week. That is a little bit of a bummer, but we're going to talk about whether or not we're still interested and should we manage our expectations? How best can we enjoy this game? Then also, and finally, we have Star Ocean 6. Is this on the horizon or is it ever coming out at all? The producer of the series came out recently and said that, you know, it's a little more difficult than it may appear for it to happen. So we're just going to talk about whether or not we will see a Star Ocean 6 or how long it might be. And then we have some comments from our listeners last week. So all this and more. I feel like I'm doing an infomercial here when I do that. But anyways, so Eric, what have you been playing this week?
Nothing too much. I'm still pretty much waiting till Octopath Traveler, but I've just been cycling through a couple of things. I know, me and my girlfriend been going through the Kingdom Hearts series. That's one thing on the HD collection for PS4, and of course going through some Breath of the Wild here and there, and then I decided to dabble little into Horizon again. I feel like I didn't give it too much of a fair chance. I mean, I enjoyed it before when I played it, but I didn't get too far into it. And I feel like I didn't give it the proper chance it did because
Horizon Zero Dawn?
Horizon Zero Dawn, because it came out almost the same time as Breath of the Wild. And I was like, come on, these are like two magnificent games coming out at the same time.
Horizon Zero Dawn is one of my favorite games. So
I mean, it's really good.
I put it really high up there. So, okay, I just want you to know where you're treading into. You give any criticism here, but go ahead.
Oh, any criticism I have is pretty light. It's a pretty solid title. The combat feels great. The story feels well executed. The voice acting seems pretty solid. The side quests and exploration factor are pretty well done also. I mean, it's a pretty well put together game. Guerrilla Games really outdid themselves with this one.
Yeah, well, one of the things I really liked with the combat was how I felt like I improved over the course of the game. And sometimes you don't see that in games where it just comes down to like a stat grind, right? Just because your stats are higher, that's why you're doing well. And in this game, I actually felt like I was just more skilled as a player by the end of the game. And I've seen some people kind of criticize the game and say, well, oh, I had to play it on the story mode because, you know, I'm not good with, you know, these types of combat systems. Like it just didn't feel like well implemented to me. But to me, the more I played it, the better I got with the bow. And I actually because I was playing it, I think over like a holiday break, I was able to get like really invested into it where I had nothing else going on. And I remember thinking like, I saw some like commercial for like some bow and arrows and I felt like, oh, like I know what I'm doing with this thing. Like I actually felt like I actually like learned like a new skill by the end of the game. So I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah. I mean, if you pay $60 for a game and the option is available, play it the way you want to. If the option is there, then, you know, who cares if someone says, oh, you didn't play it on super legendary mode? It's like, are you even a gamer or something? It's like, no, don't care what they think. I mean, if the designer intent of the game is to let you play it on the difficulty that meets your needs, you know, then, you know, that's the way it's intended to be designed. So go ahead and put it on an easier mode.
Sure. And, you know, and a lot of times I would probably be one of those people that say, hey, you know, I would kind of prefer just a story mode for certain games. However, for that particular game, I really, really enjoyed the higher difficulty. So it added a lot of enjoyment for me. So I can see where people are coming from. But I totally agree with you. Got to play the game the way you want to play it and the way you get the most enjoyment out of it. Did you get into that DLC at all for the game?
No, but if I get far enough in this game, then I'll definitely purchase the DLC.
I do like how they came out and said that, hey, this will be our only DLC. There's not going to be, anything else. It's going to be really contained. And it's, I think originally when it came out, it was like an extra $15, but it added, I think they said around 15 to 20 more hours to the game. So that's a lot of content, and it's like not really related to the main plot. So it's, it sounds kind of like that Witcher 3 type DLC where it's like, well, this is good. This is a lot of content for your money, but it's not making you feel like you missed out on something. So
the way these open world games should be doing DLC.
Yeah, exactly. So I really like that game, and I'm really excited to see what else comes out regarding that. I already want to call it a franchise, but I just want to see a sequel or something like that. Very cool. So Kingdom Hearts and Horizon Zero Dawn then, huh?
Yeah, pretty much.
Cool.
What have you been playing?
So this week I've been frustrated with playing more of Final Fantasy VII with the mods. Now, everything regarding the mod content in Final Fantasy VII, I've still really enjoyed. Really enjoyed the relocalization. But dude, like some of these mods are so fragile. I mean, if you do even the minorest thing, for example, I needed to add some stuff to my phone with a USB cable, and part of one of the mods that I have, it requires me to mount a disk to my hard drive, like a fake blank disk. And then because you have to convert Final Fantasy VII, the Steam version, to the PC version, then they can mod that version. So I unmounted the disk because it wouldn't let me freaking put stuff onto my phone because my phone was freaking out for some reason. And so I dismounted it and I put the stuff I needed to on my phone. Then I redid it. And all of a sudden, now when I play Final Fantasy VII, dude, I get Rufus, the vice president of Shinra, as a random encounter frequently now. And every time I beat him, he always whisks away on a helicopter. And it's just really weird. All of a sudden I'll be in a field, and then all of a sudden there'll be random encounters where I'm all of a sudden on an elevator in the Shinra building. And I'm well, what is going on here? And I looked it up, and they're yeah, you got to totally reinstall everything. I'm dude, that took me 45 minutes to get everything set up. They're yeah, you got to run a registry cleaner. You got to and I'm dude, this is getting ridiculous. So I'm trying to plow through it with the occasional WTF boss that appears on a random encounter. But yeah, mods are really, really cool, but sometimes they cause unforeseen issues that you don't really expect. So
yeah, I mean, I don't mess with mods much with exactly as you put it. I mean, sometimes it's just more trouble than they're worth. It's cool to play a game I've already played before in some different way.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes they just make you go through so many bells and whistles. I mean, I could figure it out and get it running, but I keep telling myself, do I really want to do this? And a lot of times I just steer at no. So it's mostly laziness that stops me from doing heavy mods of stuff on my PC.
Yeah. So they make it sound all you have to do is this, but sometimes you don't have to just do this. Sometimes there's something else you did before you even bought the game that totally screwed the whole thing up. So, anyways,
as someone who used to mod hardware, it's never that easy.
Yeah, for sure. And then when you're trying to install multiple mods, sometimes they don't really gel too well together, and you're having to Google online for people that had similar problems, and you're reading forum posts, and you're trying different settings and reinstalling, installing. Did I copy my save files? Oh, thank God I did. Big hassle, but if you get it running, I think the best course of action in the future for me is just beat the game with the fragile settings that I have. Don't do anything. Just beat it quickly. Just move on. So, anyways, that's what I've been playing this week. I might shift gears to something new. I know we have Octopath Traveler coming out soon, but before we get into that discussion, Square Enix. Eric, How do you feel about them? Do you think they're out of touch, or like, what do you think's going on with them when they're releasing games these days?
Yes and no. And what I mean by yes and no is that Square Enix is now a major publishing company for video games. So they have a lot of development studios under them, and some are doing just fine. Like the Final Fantasy 14 team is doing just great. The Dragon Quest team is doing just fine. Teams that are doing games like Bravely Default and Octopath Traveler coming out, I mean, they're doing pretty fine. A lot of my gripe with Square Enix, and probably opinion of a lot of people also, is coming down to their mismanagement of their core Final Fantasy franchise. And with how FF15 was, you know, we've talked to death about 15.
Sure.
And all the news about the FF7 remake just making us more and more concerned or worried about how it goes, and how we learned that they broke away from CyberConnect 2 and basically starting over again. I mean, it just makes me think to myself, who is ultimately managing these Final Fantasy core teams? Because we know there's like different development studios. They have something like Studio A, Studio B, or something like that, and they're like, we got Studio B to do 15, now we have A doing 7 remake. I don't know exactly who's doing it currently, but they're always shifting around teams and people dramatically to get these kind of games like Kingdom Hearts 3, Final Fantasy 7 remake, and FF15, all that stuff out. And it just seems so ridiculously mismanaged from an outside observer's view. I don't know exactly what's going on internally in there, so I can't speak on that behalf, but as someone who's watching it from the outside, it just seems like a big mess. And the number one thing Square Enix can do is to be transparent about what's going on. They don't need to show content to us necessarily, but if there's like things in trouble, or there might be people just doing big bunch of speculation or saying like this and this, it's like, it's good to have like some kind of PR occasionally, or they hire some PR to just go, hey, we're currently doing this, here's something to show off, even though it's very small, just let you know things are going underway. Because when Square Enix stays so silent about everything, it makes people speculate and start assuming. And assuming is not a good thing. And people eventually take that assumption to truth, even if it's not the truth. And it starts becoming people's vision of the truth. And Square Enix staying silent and not doing anything just makes it look worse on them.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And I think that like at the key, the heart of the matter here is there's two things. Number one, what they're doing right now, they could still do this, release the same games, not change anything. Like on the artistic front, they could be doing the exact same thing. And just from a PR standpoint, they could be doing a lot better. A lot of this chaos that surrounds pretty much most Square Enix games is a result of them just not communicating what's actually happening with the game, or just really just trying to respond to fan concerns. And I don't know why a company as large as Square Enix can't seem to figure that out. I mean, we've seen that in the past. I think you brought up before that despite Tabata's faults, he was pretty good at talking to fans, letting them know what's going on. And that got a lot of excitement back up for Final Fantasy 15. Now, there's a lot of other things going on with that game that we're really unhappy about. I know both of us agree on that. But I mean, I think that they could take a lead from that example and do that more so with just letting people know what's going on. Now, that's a total, like the PR side, marketing side. They need to totally revamp that for the company and just really just work on just the relationship with the fans. But it's really strange from an artistic standpoint, though, because let me step back and say, like, some other like great companies, like let's say BioWare, right? They used to be this great RPG company. Pretty much everything they came out with was really, really good for the most part. And then, you know, they got bought by EA, and then over time they've just slowly dwindled down to, you don't know if you can really trust them anymore. Now, when I look at BioWare, I look at that completely differently than I would look at Square Enix. When I look at Square Enix, I still get the feeling like the heart of the company is still there. I still feel like they care. They still do things like, oh, we messed up Final Fantasy 15. Here's all this free content. We're going to try to fix it. Yeah, we're putting DLC, but it's only going to be $5. We could charge $20 or $30. You know, they do things that, like, it could be much worse, right? They're going back and fixing Chrono Trigger. Final Fantasy 14, they could have just dropped that and walked away, but it was important to them, and they knew it was important to the fans. So they went back and revamped it. I mean, there is somebody there that seems to care. And I'm talking a lot about the Final Fantasy side of things, but it seems like they do care about the franchise, and they do care about their like artistic side of things. It's just very baffling to me that they just seem to not be able to knock it out of the park on the first attempt. It seems like they are routinely just releasing stuff, and then, you know, there's this fan outrage, and then they just look baffled, like, really? We had no idea this would happen. And then they go back and try to fix it, and it's just like, that's preferable to like what I said to like BioWare, where it's just like, is this even the same company?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because I really wonder myself sometimes, how does Square Enix not know people are going to react like this? How do you release something like the Chrono Trigger PC and not expect people to backlash by the poor porting quality? I assure you, anyone in quality control who's decent at their job could have looked at that game and said, that's not an appropriate port. That is not something that we consider quality standard here at the company. You cannot release that. You have got to actually put some effort into making this an actual PC port. It's like, you do not just take the mobile and convert it over and then use Visual Basic text to input names for characters and just convert the mobile screen. That is pure laziness.
Yeah, and what concerns me about that is, are there not Chrono Trigger fans that work at Square Enix? Right? Because I don't even think you needed somebody like with a marketing degree or somebody that has like extensive experience in that side of business to just look at that and be like, well, I grew up with this game as a kid. I really liked it, and this version sucks. Like, even the people that were working on it, did it not occur to them like, like, I don't feel good about this?
Well,
you know?
Yeah, I mean, almost the entirety of Squaresoft is from back in the 90s is not there anymore. Very select people from the Squaresoft days are still there. And most of the people you see today were people who were playing these RPGs when they were like, you know, you're in my age, like back in the 90s. And now they're, now we're all like in our late 20s, early 30s. And these are most of the people who are programming stuff at Square Enix now, or taking project leads for, at least for smaller projects. Bigger projects are, I know, being handled by bigger people like Tetsuya Nomura. But I mean, that's really most of the team. And I'm kind of wondering sometimes if it's just like they're just inexperienced, or they're not thinking of the big picture, or they're not thinking of quality standard. It's just kind of like, we just want to get it done and out of there. And I just think over time, the quality focus of Squaresoft is just not translated to the new Square Enix generation.
Sure. Well, and I think, honestly, in my opinion, I think this just comes down to what I was saying at the beginning, was they're just out of touch, right? So if you look at like we've been talking about, the Chrono Trigger on release on Steam, case in point, they didn't put much effort into it. And I would imagine that's because, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but in Japan, PC releases are not as big as they are in the West. In the West, PC gaming is a little bigger. So to them, that's a smaller market, and they just put it on Steam and we're like, we'll just localize it, whatever. But they didn't even think like, well, Western gamers really like PC gaming. Like they take this very seriously, and there's this tremendous fan backlash. Whereas, we're not going to freak out if you put, well, I might freak out, but most people aren't going to freak out if you put a really crappy port, which they kind of did on mobile. So there's that element where they just feel out of touch. And I think that's also comes down to with Square Enix in the past, trying to emphasize mobile gaming. They're trying to play to their home market, but then also project it to the West. And in the West, we don't really care about mobile games as much. So like, it just comes down to, it's not that they don't care. It's just like, they don't like, either they're out of touch or they're trying to market their games to both markets at the same time, Now,
I have noticed that they don't heavily market their mobile games as they used to.
Yeah, they've kind of backed
at
off
least
a little
in the
bit.
West.
Yeah,
because their mobile games were a no-show at their half-hour E3 presentation.
Thank God.
Yeah, but the mobile titles are okay. They're shallow, is the best way to put it. They're very much shallow products, trying to bank on a little bit of nostalgia to, get you to pour some money into it. But I mean, they're okay. They're not the worst free-to-play games you can find on the mobile devices. So I won't get on them too much, but but like saying before, like the marketing isn't as strong on the mobile titles as they used to be. Almost like they are taking feedback that people are not really seeking this as much as they're just wanting like actual legit like RPG games. And I haven't seen anything real new come out, or rather that they're still banking on Mobius, Brave Exvius, Opera Omnia, the Kingdom Hearts one, Record Keeper. I just named 5 mobile titles they have up right now that are like the free to play win structure RPG. Mm-hmm. And Final Fantasy Dimensions 2, that's 6.
Yeah, I mean, so you are right that they've kind of cut back on how much they've been promoting that, especially in the West. I was really excited not to see like an onslaught of mobile gaming at E3. I think they finally realized that would really irritate a lot of people, especially since they didn't have much to show. But
I think you might see more at Tokyo Game Show.
Yeah.
The mobile.
That's a good point. We probably will. That'll be interesting to see. I'm actually thinking about that. But go ahead.
I mean, it's okay. I mean, I'm not saying they should get rid of their mobile stuff, because sometimes some good stuff does come out. Like, as much as I still didn't care for the FF15 Pocket Edition. Something like that, the concept of it is a good idea. Taking like a big Final Fantasy title and just like demaking it to something like that. Like, I thought that was pretty interesting in itself. Unfortunately, it was FF15 they did it with, but
yeah. Well, and I don't really have a problem with them doing that, right? So like anyone that would have a problem with mobile titles coming from Square Enix, I'm imagining they have this idea that because they're doing the mobile titles, they're not doing other games, which I don't necessarily agree with.
No, they have a whole team. They have like their own small team dedicated to mobile titles. So what people are working on with the mobile title do not affect at all what the AAA teams are doing.
Yeah, and that's kind of my take on that. So when I criticize the mobile gaming, I pretty much just criticize their marketing of it in the West in the past, where they would really try to promote it like it was the cream of the crop that Square Enix is working on right now. When it's like, no, like I don't want to know about this at all. Actually, stop pushing this in my face. And they've really cut back on that. But I mean, it just boggles my mind that they can't just come out like you said. They haven't come out with like a really great game in like quite a while. It's strange that like on the artistic front, they just seem like they're just so off from where they used to be, you know?
Yeah. I mean, one thing people need to acknowledge also is that, and it'll make it much easier on your expectation to not keep thinking Squaresoft is going to come back. It's not going to. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, you just got to face it. Almost all the people and teams that were in the Squaresoft days are not there anymore. Most of them are gone. So you have completely new teams making these games, and what you can do is to expect from them is to uphold the level of quality that Squaresoft gave. But you also have to, if you want to keep enjoying games made by Square, you do kind of have to embrace that the series are going to evolve and be different for better or worse.
Sure. And if you research where a lot of these people went, right? In the early 2000s, a lot of Square employees left. So a lot of Square employees followed Sakaguchi to Mistwalker. A lot of them went to go work on the Xeno games, the Xeno Saga games. There's a fair amount that went on to go work on the Shadow Hearts games. A lot of people don't realize. And I'm sure I think there's another company out there too that was formed that pulled a lot of old Square employees from the 90s. And I'm not saying that obviously you still have people like Nomura on there. You still have Katase, Hiroki Ito is still with the company. You still have these heavyweights. So there's still that direction there. I think that they could come out with something, but it's just it's just strange to me. Even when I look at games like that they're not as closely directly working on, where they've kind of given, like, for example, the Tokyo RPG Factory games, where they're kind of like, okay, you're your own small team, you're isolated, make magic happen. It's a small team. We're going to kind of stay out of it. But then you look at it and it's like the whole thing is trying to market to gamers that prefer that classic style, of the SNES era. And it's not even pixel art, right? It's this like weird, like 3-dimensional like thing that like it kind of just looks like a cell phone game. It doesn't look good. Or we're going to talk about later. They kind of hit the Octopath Traveler. They got the art right, the artistic side right. The music's great, but people have said, well, the story's lacking. Like, and there's some instances where where the story actually feels kind of sloppy. And I don't know. I haven't played the game yet, and we'll talk about it in a little bit. But it just seems to me that like they seem like they just can't figure out why people used to like the old stuff, or even if they're capable of doing that. I mean, if you go on Steam and type in, indie RPG, you're going to see game after game where like some indie developer is trying to like emulate that SNES era art style, right? Not just like RPG Maker games. Like I'm talking about, I don't want to say actual RPGs, because there are a few RPG Maker games that were actually pretty good. So don't hate on me about that. But I mean, you have off the top of my head, Cosmic Star Heroine. The artwork for that game is fantastic, and it was popular because of the art style of that game. It actually captured kind of that Chrono Trigger-esque type art style. Maybe not quite to the level of Chrono Trigger, but it kind of gave people a nostalgic feeling. And then when Square tries to get the same effect, it's like, why, why are you not like getting this? You keep flopping routinely, even with the Chrono Trigger deal. They had to patch it 4 times before the graphics were actually something that, fans actually appreciated and liked. It's just, I don't know. To me, they always seem like they can go back and fix it, but they can't. They just don't seem like they're in touch enough to like actually do what needs to happen the first time. So
there are 2 teams, I believe, that are still very firmly in touch with what makes their series great. Yep, you already know, because I already mentioned it before. Yeah. Is of course the Dragon Quest team. Yuji Horii, still the creator of Dragon Quest, dating all the way back to the first one. He's still there. He's teaching. He's definitely teaching like new blood how to make Dragon Quest games. Like, I think he is more on his final years in the company, but yeah. He's still there. He still is wanting to make Dragon Quest games. As he still has the energy to make like Dragon Quest 12, as he said. But I mean, we haven't gotten Dragon Quest XI yet, but a lot of the reviews, at least in Japan, or people who have gotten their hands on the Japanese version, say it's a fantastic game. It's like an evolved form of Dragon Quest VIII, and it still keeps its roots to the classic Dragon Quest series that people know and love. Yeah. It's like they still have a good idea of what make Dragon Quest games great. So there's still that part, that team and that company that are still doing fantastic. You know, they never lost their stride. And then, of course, we got the FF14 team, where, I mean, this is like their story, the quality telling in their stories are like something that makes me think of the days of old of Squaresoft. But at the same time, it feels like they're embracing more modern aspects to storytelling, of course, because, you know, of technology today, able to present things better. But I mean, FF14's story, from A Realm Reborn to Heavensward to Stormblood, I mean, just blows 13 and 15 story like out of the water, or like anything that's just come from Square Enix lately in terms of Final Fantasy games. I'm like, if people are looking for a legit Final Fantasy storyline, then you really should go past the fact that it's an MMO. I mean, it works well as an MMO. The story complements it, of course. But if people can look past that and at least start the free trial and see for themselves, they'll see that there is a good Final Fantasy story in this game. I mean, people are like, where is our good Final Fantasy stories? Where are they? And they're like, it's right here. I mean, Naoki Yoshida is working magic with this series. I mean, there are definitely ups and downs to it. If you're like a person who's deep into the community like I am, I mean, there's some things they do right and there's some things they do wrong. But on the grand scheme of things, like especially if you're someone who just plays on the casual level, I mean, you got like 3 great Final Fantasy stories in one, and it just keeps going every few months. They keep adding more story content.
There's been a lot of talk about having him coming on to leaving Final Fantasy 14 because he's been with it for so long and working on the next Final Fantasy entry. Now, I've seen where he said he would do that, but he's like, look, I'm an employee here. If Square wants me to do it, like I don't want to lose my job. I'll do it. What do you think that would actually? How do you think that would translate for him doing a single player entry versus Final Fantasy 14? Do you think he would do well with a Final Fantasy 16? Would that excite you? Do you have any thoughts with that?
That's hard to say, because it's an interesting circumstance that got him on as the director and producer. He's someone who's very passionate, and I think that's something that goes a very long way when you are a director producer. And he has he's smart enough to back up that passion. I mean, I'm sure Tabata with 15 was passionate about, you know, doing FF15, but I just don't think he had the right amount of talent to completely foresee his vision of the game. And because of that, it's a very lackluster game. But like Naoki Yoshida is just, I mean, he, in terms of the FF14 community, he's a freaking rock star. I mean, people love him. I mean, I met him personally, and he's a very nice guy on top of that, or like he shows a nice face at least.
Yeah. Well, and what I think he brings, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I've seen from him talking in the past was he actually is a fan of Final Fantasy, but also online games, right? So I've seen him talk about like he used to spend hours upon hours playing EverQuest when he was a kid. And he also played Final Fantasy 11. So like when Final Fantasy 14 had its issues, he was able to come in from both a developer side, but also from an actual gamer who plays these games and say, well, no, this is the issues. We can fix it by doing X, Y, and Z. And so I think that's probably why he's been so successful at what he does, right? Because he is in touch with what made these games great. Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, that's a major contribution to why he was hired in his position, because he had a very extensive knowledge of what makes MMOs great. Like the first moment he was like, he even says like in like interviews, like the first day he took over, he played FF14 for like a couple hours and he himself had to put it down. He had so many issues with the game, like down to the interface, how you engage in combat and everything.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, okay, we gotta do something to fix this immediately. I played it for a few hours and I just wanted to put it down and never play it again. So, I mean, and it got to the point where he's like, okay, this game is not fixable. The only thing we can do is make it a little better. Like we got and he sent an ultimatum to Square Enix. It's like, dude, make the game a little better and still have this damaged reputation, or destroy it all and we start back from the ground up and we release Realm Reborn. And he was pretty tough on them. And then Square Enix was like, okay, well, you only got this amount of time to do it, though. And they accomplished making an MMO in, I believe, 2.5 years' time.
Which is crazy. Like, that's a really good turnaround. And it was a better game, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and granted, they still had the assets and world and lore.
Sure.
To work off of. But making an MMO in 2.5 years, even with that, is an incredible feat. They had to have poured so much money to make that happen.
Yeah. So anyways, it's we'll see. I think that, like, at the very least, the fact that Square Enix is kind of backing off promoting the mobile games, like you said, we're seeing a lot of good ground being covered with Final Fantasy 14. You said Dragon Quest 11, that's coming out soon. So here in the West, and that's supposed to be really good. So I think that Square is starting, you know, they're going back and fixing Chrono Trigger. I mean, these are small things, but, you know, collectively, I think it shows a signal that the company is changing. But I do think you're exactly right that the days of old, right? You can't ever go back to the nostalgic time. I think Squaresoft is long and gone, but maybe they can just be something that's better than it has been. So, and I think they are going in that direction. So,
yeah, just root that they. Just hope they do something to make themselves better than Squaresoft. I know nostalgia will ultimately not let people believe that.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of this too. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, why can't they just make anything as good as Final Fantasy 9 again? But, you know, it is what it is. Just hope they they go in a direction that makes the series better than it was before. It's like, don't ask for something the same, but do expect them to meet a level of quality that they used to back then. And I'm sorry, and to answer the Naoki Yoshida question, I think he could do a good job directing or producing Final Fantasy 16, but he himself said that he likes himself more in the Final Fantasy 14 theme. He believes he does a much better job there than he would doing another project. And you know, I would have to see what he can do to believe that, but I do take his word for it that he's much better off staying with the 14 team.
Yeah, well, and the only question is who. Tabata has said he's not going to do 16. He has no interest. Nomura and Katase seem like they're going to be tied up for the next 25 years, making all these 7 remake games. So I think it's going to be him unless they pull out Ito.
I mean, they could pull out Ito.
I don't know what he's been doing for the last 10 years, but I don't know. We'll see. Probably won't happen. Won't hear anything regarding that in a very, very long time, I imagine. But definitely be interesting to see. Moving on, though, Octopath Traveler. It's coming out next week. I'm excited.
Eric, I'm excited.
You're excited. Awesome. That's one of the main reasons I got a Switch recently was because I wanted to play this game, among other games, but that was kind of the hair on the camel back. I was like, okay, I got to get it now as opposed to later. But I see in a couple places on the internet that the game is not quite living up to expectations as some people were hoping that we're able to play it a little longer. Most importantly, people are starting to say, well, this isn't Final Fantasy VI. And people were getting this opinion that this game was going to be similar to that game, or like it. I think at one point, someone involved with the game said this game was a spiritual successor to Final Fantasy VI, which even from what I played, I can tell you it's not. Right?
No, it is not.
But it seems like people are like, hey, like, well, this game only follows these characters' stories separately. These characters' stories as a self-contained thing are, you know, some are great, some are not so great, but they don't really connect or gel well. Even when you have other people in your party and you go to a new town and you experience a new character story, the characters that are with you in your party, they don't even have scenes with the new character. It all seems very separate, and it's kind of disappointing for some people. It seems that this game thus far is not, like we said, going to be one of the best games ever made. And I can understand if that was your expectations, but Eric, where do you think people should
I can say
put
this
their
for
expectations
any
for this
game. Don't set your expectations so high just because it looks really good. It's like, don't think it's going to be like, oh, this is going to be the next Final Fantasy VI. It's going to be a masterpiece. It's going to be pulled through the test of time. It's like, wait till you get the game and play it. Keep your expectations like at a flat level. It's like not low, not high, just right there in the middle. You just don't know what you're going to expect. It could be good. It could be bad. And that's exactly what I'm thinking of Octopath right now. I'm like, from what I played from the early access demo, that I like what I played. I like where it's going, but I don't know how the game is going to play in the long run. Like, how will the combat evolve over time? How will the story progress? The story structure is the thing that I'm actually most worried about for the game.
Yeah, me too.
Because the 8-person structure is cool, but I mean, someone in the comments make sense of it for me if you can. But from what I get of it, you start a character, like I picked Primrose for to start with, and I go to I finish her intro story, but afterwards you can go on the map and basically collect the rest of the party members that you didn't pick for the intro, and you can see their intro, you can do their intro, but then you can progress any of their stories in the game. You have to go to a pub and change out, and then you keep progressing in their story to the end of it. So it feels like it's ultimately telling you like 8 separate stories and in this very convoluted way.
Yeah. And I think that's the main criticism I've seen, is that people are wondering, how is this going to gel together? If you can get the complete game in one playthrough, you know, what if I start off with a different character? Are we going to have different scenes when the new character enters? You can't just have the character enter the town and then like have this other person's, you know, deal kick off without like some kind of minor scene. But apparently that's one of the main issues, is when you enter a new town for a new character, you just walk up to the character and then like their whole sequence starts. There's no like minor scene. There's no like, oh my God, this person's chasing me, help me, or some way for you to be involved in this person's life. It's just all of a sudden they're telling you a story. And then like from then on, that person's in your party. And that's very, very disappointing to me. Now, maybe it's not quite that bad for like the whole game. I don't know. But from what I've seen, the self-contained stories themselves for each of the characters, some of them are still pretty good. And I look forward for that reason, you know, and I still think the soundtrack's awesome. I love the soundtrack. I really like the battle system. I like the art style. So, I mean, if the story is pretty good for like the individual characters, it just doesn't gel well. I think I can get over that a little bit, but that's always going to be a major criticism for me. But you know, the idea that it's going to like ruin the game, I don't think so. But it is a weird and awkward.
Yeah, the presentation, it seems solid. I mean, everything looks right in that department. Like I said, the only real concern I have is just how the story interconnects with all 8 of these characters. And
it doesn't connect. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's the thing. You know, if each story is well executed, that's pretty cool.
It's
And
like
they
you're
did say
getting.
you can play through all their stories in one game. Like, you don't have to make multiple games to
Mhm.
do it. Like, you just go to the pub, you switch out with them, and then you start their story, and they're separated by chapters, apparently. So if you wanted to, just from what I understand, this could not be the case, but from what I understand, you have the 8 characters, and each of them have chapters you have to go through. And you pick a character. You could technically do the first chapter of everyone, and then do the second chapter of everyone. Or you can take one character and take them to the end chapter for them. Then you can go to the pub and switch to another character and start from their chapter all the way to the end. I think they're letting you choose how you progress the story in all the 8 of these stories.
That's really cool. I like that in a sense, but I do wish it was more of a traditional story structure.
Me too.
So that's just me. Who knows? Maybe we'll play this game and we'll kind of experience the game from this other side, and we'll say, you know what? I didn't think I was going to like this, but I actually kind of like it. I don't know. But to me, it sounds like 8 separate Octopath Traveler games. You know?
Yeah. And it could be great. It could be like something we didn't know we wanted. But I do strongly suggest to people, like, temper your expectations. If you're not entirely sure if you want the product yet, wait till other people get it and let them play it and let them tell you how it is.
Yeah.
If it's something that you would want to play, then go out and spend the $60 for it.
Sure.
But I mean, listen to YouTubers who play it, see what they think. If it's something that sounds like it interests you, then go ahead and grab it. I mean, I'm going to grab it because I've lived my entire life of risk and reward of video games that come out the first day. So I'm used to excitement and disappointment at the same time. But
yeah. And here's kind of what I'll say just surrounding this is, look, with me personally, and I don't know, and you know, everyone's different that's listening to this, but I bought I Am Setsuna. I can't remember how much I paid for that. I was a little disappointed with that game, but I enjoyed that game. And I know that's different, you know, Tokyo RPG Factory, but I'm just kind of thinking in the same target market that they're trying to attract, right? So I bought I Am Setsuna. I paid however much for it. I was a little disappointed with it, but overall, like, I think it was a net positive. I enjoyed it more than I didn't like it. I still bought the sequel to that game, Lost Sphere. I hated that game. But what I'm trying to say is I enjoyed I Am Setsuna, and when I play Octopath Traveler, from even the demo that I've played, even if I have these reservations with the story, I think it is going to be a better game than I Am Setsuna, right? So from that perspective, I still think, like, if you look at this correctly, it can still be an enjoyable game to play. So
yeah, the Octopath team does, in all fairness, have a good track record behind them. They did make the Bravely default games, which were good. The second one, not as good as the first one, but it was still a good game.
Mm-hmm.
But despite some weird faults with Bravely Default, like the chapter 5 to 8, I mean, it was a solid game. It had a solid combat system. The presentation was fantastic. The story was fun to follow, and the characters were interesting. So hopefully ideas and ways they developed on those games translate well to this one. And so far, from what I played, at least with Primrose and the other warrior from the previous demo, I liked it. I mean, I thought it was great.
Yeah, so I'm still going to buy it. I think I'm going to like it overall. I think I'm going to have some issues, like we said, with the story structure, but we'll have to see. But I'm going to put my expectations kind of low, kind of like, well, I don't know what to expect. We'll see. But I would like to see them make more games like Octopath Traveler, maybe with a more traditional story. So I do hope it does well. So,
and whoever said that this isn't Final Fantasy VI, like, whatever. Like, what is going to be better than Final Fantasy VI in your eyes? Whoever wrote
Final
that
Fantasy
article?
9? Oh, sorry. I was trying to answer that question.
Well, I mean, in the context of Final Fantasy VI in its style.
Oh, okay, yeah,
it's
I
like,
gotcha.
Well, anything beat that nostalgic factor for you. It's like Octopath could be like one of the greatest things ever, and you could still go, Well, it's not Final Fantasy VI, but
sure. Well, and like, one of the articles I saw, I think it was from Kotaku, but the point they were making was that the developers said that this was going to be a spiritual successor to Final Fantasy VI, but what they really meant by that was from mechanically, like the game was supposed to be similar to Final Fantasy VI, with each character having their own unique play style and the turn-based combat, which I can see that perspective. That's, you know, I Am Setsuna did the same thing. Like they said, oh, this is a spiritual successor to Chrono Trigger. People went in thinking like, oh, from a story perspective, this is going to be Chrono Trigger. I mean, I'm not going to spoil the game, but it's kind of like Chrono Trigger, but not really. So I think that like that's kind of like a miscommunication there with Final Fantasy VI, is that people expect, well, there's going to be this huge cast of characters and like all their stories are going to intertwine, and you know, it's going to be this epic tale. And then you play the game and it's like, well, actually, like each character's story is kind of separated and not really intertwined at all. So,
I mean, I can kind of see that, but I think people would have a better time comparing it to as a spiritual successor to Saga.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot. Yeah.
I think you would get into Octopath Traveler better comparing it to that than Final Fantasy VI.
Yeah. So,
Final Fantasy VI is still a mainstream like story, and where characters are joining and you're getting their story as you're progressing through an ultimate goal. And Octopath Traveler does not seem like that. I don't think there's like some big overall goal. There might be, but the way it's structured, it's not coming off like that. It sounds like it wants to tell you 8 separate stories.
Right. I'm not seeing like a main overarching plot, at least thus far from what I've played. So, you know, we'll have to see. Cool. So I'm going to pick it up. I think it comes out on the 14th, right?
The 13th this Friday.
13th. Cool. So that's coming up. I'm excited. I'm going to be playing it all next weekend, hopefully, as time permits. And we can give our initial thoughts next week on the game. Non-spoiler, of course. And we'll tell you what we think. Who knows? Maybe next week we'll be telling you how much we hated it or loved it. We'll have to let you guys know.
Mm-hmm. But it's like Lost Sphere.
Oh, dude, that game was...
Remember, we were like, oh, this may actually be good. You never know. Yeah, and stuff like that. And afterwards, we were like,
This was actually worse than I Am Setsuna, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a hard $50 I ate. But
yeah, same.
It's all good. So moving on though, we have Star Ocean, the series. So let's see here. I'm gonna pull up this article. It actually came out a while ago, but I just want to go through it and kind of give some context here. So let's see here. So I was reading this article. It said Star Ocean 6. It's not that simple to make. Says Square-Enix. So basically what this article is stating is very small, but the Square-Enix producer, I can't pronounce his name. Last name is Kobayashi. So is that Kobayashi?
Yeah, sounds right.
Says that the publisher is aware of the demand for new entry, but apparently it's not that simple to make. If it could be made without Tri-Ace, then surely it would be possible, but that's not the case, is it? I'm saying please wait a little longer. Won't you please wait a little longer? So anyways, I don't know the details regarding like why the difficulty with Tri-Ace. I don't know. I can imagine just working with anybody would be an issue, but
they might be working on something else right now.
Yeah. I definitely think that one of the biggest issues right now with why we have not heard anything regarding a Star Ocean 6 is because Star Ocean 5, Integrity and Faithfulness, underperformed from everything.
Bad. It was a bad game.
Yeah, like not only did it underperform, like it scored really low. Like I was seeing, I think IGN gave it like a 5.5, and IGN usually does not give games under 6s. So the fact that they gave that a, like, I think, let me double check this before somebody corrects me in the comments, but it was pretty low.
it was in the mediocre thing pretty much. I mean, I played it myself, and oh man, it is definitely the worst Star Ocean in the series. It's they try to do a seamless open world type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't work because the entire world was completely uninteresting and it just felt like an obstacle. The next thing was that they had 8 players in combat at once. And that was the most chaotic feeling type of system. And it was bad to the point that I felt like I needed to be on a healer and just focus on making sure people stay alive while they take the monsters down.
Yeah.
Because because the AIs were so dumb that they couldn't handle themselves. So I had to handle them.
So what I'm seeing here is IGN gave it a 5.8. GameSpot gave it a 5. And these are out of 10, by the way, not out of 5. And on a Metacritic, it's at 58%. So it wasn't very highly rated. A lot of the issues you brought up were the big main criticism I saw. And I saw other criticisms too, like I guess in the cutscenes, you could like move the characters around.
There were no cutscenes in the game. There technically wasn't.
Well, I mean, okay, end game scenes, like story sequences. You would have, I apparently, correct me if I'm wrong, but they would have story sequences that were not cinematic, right? It was just like the camera would zoom in and like your end game model would be talking or whatever. But while somebody's talking to you and having a moment, you could move the character around, or you could do like different, like, I don't know, like facial impressions or something. I don't know. I was seeing a video on it and it seemed kind of like, from what I saw, a lot of people felt like that was kind of took them out of the moment.
Like you know how Skyrim is in terms of how they present like their story scenes. Like,
yeah,
you can still move around, but the characters are like talking to each other and doing something. That's how Star Ocean 5 was. And the problem is it was trying to tell you a JRPG cinematic like story in that structure. And it was so poorly done. It's like you didn't know how to feel in scenes because you couldn't tell how the characters were feeling or how they're interacting with something. And JRPGs are structured stories where you need like the cinematography for it.
Yeah.
And like it was so awkward when Star Ocean did it. And like I couldn't even really follow the story well because of it, because I just had no idea how the characters were reacting or how they really felt about something. Like you couldn't use their body language at all with it. And I mean, the story was already mediocre on top of that. So having that in it also was just like the whole game was just so bad.
Yeah. So it seems like it's beyond just like a few patches being able to fix maybe the AI. It's just the whole concept was not a good idea. And I saw like with this game, one of the things they wanted to do was try to like reboot the series with a fresh idea. And it sounds like they kind of tried to emulate Western RPGs but apply a JRPG framework over it. And it just didn't turn out that good, or turn out that well, I should say. But I see some fans are worried that because this game did not do well at all, and it was such a long time in between the last game, that they're worried that like, will we ever see a Star Ocean 6? I can see why people would think that, but the only reason I think that's not the case is I think if you look at it, it's not that people are not interested in the Star Ocean franchise. I think it's just that game was reviewed so poorly that it turned a lot of people away, myself included. Because if you look at Star Ocean 3, that was released on the PSN store and like as a 1080p remaster. And I was reading online that actually hit somewhere around 1.5 million sales, which is freaking amazing for that game. So, I mean, like the fact that like older games are still like killing it with these re-releases tells me that like it's somebody somewhere must be thinking like, okay, it's not that people are not interested. It's that we just put out a bad game, you know?
Yeah. What I do find interesting is I'm surprised at the demand for a new Star Ocean is as high as it is, despite people being so critical about 3 and 4 also. I thought 3 and 4 were decent. I thought they were pretty good games, not magnificent games, but they were pretty good. But people like Star Ocean fans in particular are very critical of them. Like, they didn't like the plot twist to 3, and they just didn't like the characters in 4. And 5 was just straight out bad all around.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised that at this point people are like demanding a Star Ocean 6, like, this is going to be the one. This is going to be the game that, you know, makes it's going to be just as good as Star Ocean 2. And that's what people are just pretty much expecting, is they want the next Star Ocean 2, which was really good. And I don't know if they're ever going to get that.
So
from 3, 4, and 5 alone.
Yeah. I'm kind of an oddball. Like, I bought and played through Star Ocean: The Last Hope completely, and I enjoyed that game. I didn't think it was amazing, but I thought it was a good like 8.5 out of 10. And I had a really good time with it. So maybe there's other people out there like me that aren't quite as critical. I would imagine that if, you know, you haven't played a good Star Ocean game since the 90s, if that was like your opinion, the idea of another Star Ocean game coming out is probably not too exciting, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not excited about the franchise. I don't think I ever have been excited for Star Ocean. It's just a game that was there. I was like, oh, I'll pick it up.
Really? I think part of the appeal to me, though, is because I think if Star Ocean, like, let's say Star Ocean: The Last Hope, right? Let's say that game came out and it was not set in like a sci-fi setting. If it was set in just like a medieval setting, or, you know, whatever the case, as long as it's not sci-fi, right? I think I would have been more critical of the story itself. But I tend to really like sci-fi games. I like the sci-fi setting. I like the sci-fi genre in general. So the fact that like anything starts off sci-fi, for me, you're immediately starting like on good ground. So maybe it just hit the right tone for me. It felt very Star Trek-y to me. And that's something that appealed to me. So I think perhaps that's kind of the appeal to others, I would imagine, is just having a good like actual sci-fi JRPG that's, you know, lets you travel the universe and fly around in spaceships and travel to different planets and stuff. And, you know, so many JRPGs are often set in this like medieval setting or this like slightly futuristic setting, but it's, you know, always about these warring nations. And, you know, it's just something that's a little different. So,
yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I always felt like the weakest part of Star Ocean was that there wasn't much space travel in it. What I did like about 4 that the others didn't do is that there were more planets that we traveled to, or like more interesting scenarios like time travel. But like Star Ocean 3 in particular, 80% of the game you are on one planet. And
that's an issue.
And it wasn't that the story was bad for it, but when you play a game like that and it looks so sci-fi themed, like if you never played a Star Ocean game before and you pick it up and it looks like something like you're just like, it's a very space centric type game. But when you actually play it, then like the majority of your time is spent on one planet, a medieval planet on top of that. And it's an interesting story where you're like people who are like, who are futuristic, like compared to these people. And, you know, that's an interesting story in itself, but I can just imagine that being disappointing for someone who picks up the game for the first time. And Star Ocean 1 and 2 were kind of like that also. So, I mean, Star Ocean has always been disappointing to me on that end, but I still enjoyed them for what they were regardless.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the big thing with me is, and I think like you kind of hit on a good point, was that it gives this appeal like you're going to be doing all this crazy stuff, but like at the end of the day, it ends up not being the case. But I just kind of like the aesthetic of it. I like the the appeal of the sci-fi universe. And that's the main thing. The reason I play it. I don't think I'm trying to think if Star Ocean 6 was coming out at the same time as Dragon Quest 11 or Kingdom Hearts 3, I don't think I would buy it. I would definitely, I'd buy it eventually, but I think I would end up definitely going for those other games. So it's not something that's at the top of my list, but it always seems like it's something that would interest me when I don't have something else to play. So maybe that's where it sits with me, but I definitely think we're going to see a Star Ocean 6. I mean, it's like I said, the older games have been doing really well with these re-releases. So I think they just need to work on the formula a little bit and kind of polish out some of the issues. Maybe the setting, like you said, just kind of spread it out a little bit. Let it actually feel like it's this like massive scope of a game, and let you travel across all these planets, all these new environments, really put some effort into it. It sounds like Star Ocean Integrity and Faithfulness was a little under budget too. I don't know. So,
well, I know people don't want to hear this, but they are technically releasing the Star Ocean mobile game later this year. If you need your Star Ocean fixing in some way or shape or form.
Try not to bring that up, but yeah, there is a Star Ocean mobile game coming out soon. I think it's only coming out in Japan though, right? Oh, it was released in Japan on December 7th, 2016, I see.
Yeah, it's getting a Western release.
Well, I don't know. It's featuring 3-dimensional characters and environments, so maybe that'll be interesting. I don't know. I'm probably not going to play that.
I'm sure they'll find some way to make it shallow feeling.
Yeah. So, I don't know. Eric, finishing off with this topic, though, do you think there will be a Star Ocean 6, and when do you think it could be announced, if at all?
I mean, it's always possible. I mean, I can't really predict it. These games have came out in their own random times.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess they've gotten one on each console generation, so maybe
the PlayStation 5?
Maybe the PlayStation 5. And even then, if it does, I don't expect it to have like a big budget or anything. So maybe a Switch title would be good, but maybe a little lower budget. I don't know. Maybe. I think they really need to go back to the drawing board. Think about what people liked about Star Ocean and try to evolve that aspect instead of trying to implement Western approaches to gaming in theirs. That was a big mistake for Star Ocean 5. I think they should just stick to what they know.
Yeah, because if I want to play a Western game, I'm just going to go play the real thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'm not saying I discourage companies from trying aspects of other gaming styles, but Star Ocean is just something that just clearly does not work with Western ideals. It's a very JRPG game.
Yeah, for sure. All right. But I think that about wraps that topic up. We do have 2 comments that we have to bring up from last week's episode. So let's go ahead and get to that. Here, let me turn on my screen here. All right, so we have BioPhoenix. He said, it's funny every time someone mentions a newer RPG that happens to have translation that is not 100% perfect, people crap on it and say it's a bad game in general. I always tell them that games like Final Fantasy VII and Xenogears, which are highly regarded, have pretty poor translations, and yet they're still great games. That's one point he brought up. And we were just talking about, I think the context of that was I was saying that I was surprised how much better I find Final Fantasy VII. The script anyways, with it relocalized by these fans, there's a lot of improvements that I never realized. So that's kind of the context he's giving that. And I'm trying to think of games in which the translation was a big issue for people, and I can't think of any off the top of my head. But can you, Eric?
Final Fantasy Tactics. No,
well, okay,
the original translated script is good. I mean, it's good, but sometimes it sounded a little convoluted in its explanation of things. And if you play War of the Lions, I think they explain a scenario better or execute how a certain character is feeling about something better. But I could easily say most games from the Super Nintendo and PS1 era could have gotten a better translation. It's just technology at the times. You don't have the level of ability to localize a product like you do today. So I think you could go to almost any RPG that was localized and translated over here and say to yourself, well, this could have been better.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, like, from the way he's kind of saying this is, that people will like literally be upset about the translation of the game. And when I go back to those older games, even Final Fantasy Tactics, like I never really had a problem with the original. It's just something that's interesting when I play the newer version. I'm just like, oh, okay, well, like this is better, right? But like I didn't really have a problem with the old one to a point where it actually affected my enjoyment of the game.
I mean, did you have a problem with FF7 before playing the retranslated one?
Yes and no. When I was a kid, no. But as an adult playing the game, I feel like the first 10 hours of the game is kind of rough because there's so many grammar issues and just poor dialogue options. I don't want to say options, but poor dialogue in certain sequences that seem rushed to me. And I've always wanted like a more cleaner experience. So, and that's what I was going to say. The only game I could think of is Final Fantasy VII. I mean, just with instances like this guy are sick, even, right? Even small stuff like that, which really isn't a localization issue. It's just a lack of attention to detail. So, but like the original Final Fantasy Tactics one, like you brought up, I can go play the original just fine and not have any issues. And I've actually seen some people say they prefer the original over more of the Lions version. I think it's a minority, but that might just because they don't appreciate that Shakespearean way of speak. I don't know, but regardless, I think what he's saying is right though, that like, hey, if you have a problem with older games that have translation issues, or even newer games, just remember these older games that are so highly regarded. They had similar issues and people didn't really have a problem. So
I will say that I am interested in, someone posted this in the Dark Pixel podcast that we did earlier this week that I saw that was interesting. He posted a link to a fan retranslated Breath of Fire 2. And I was looking at it, I was comparing it. I'm like, wow, this is really night and day on the translation. And I was like, I'm actually interested in trying this out. I do actually want to see the better translated version of this game, because they use like the same dialogue from both the Super Nintendo and GBA version. Yeah. So I want to see what it looks like at, the translation at its best.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's really cool that you can go back and get this more polished version of something that was released a long time ago. That's even why people get excited when, they re-release TV series with remastered visuals, or off the top of my head, they went back and redid all the CGI or special effects for the original Star Trek with William Shatner and back in the day. They went back and put actual CGI in instead of like just toy ships or paintings. And people ate that stuff up. It's just like being able to experience something that you enjoyed when you were young over again with like something that feels new. It's really, really exciting. So
that is pretty neat.
All right. He was also bringing up for Xillia 2 with the silent protagonist. He said, yeah, when you beat the game and do a new game plus, you can turn his voice on, and it has to do with a spoiler near the end of the game. I'm not going to say it here just in case, but I looked it up myself because I knew it was not going to finish the game for being very disappointing. And I'm kind of glad I spoiled it for myself because it's really dumb. So yeah, you were talking about that a while ago. I think you were surprised that you found out with Xillia 2 with not having a silent, it has a silent protagonist, but then if you do new game plus, all of a sudden he talks. It's very, very strange. And I haven't seen anybody that said that was a highlight of the game for them.
You can spoil it for me, man. I'm not going to play it again.
Oh, I don't know if I'm gonna do it on here. I think he mentions it in the comments a little bit more context, but I'll save the spoiler from here in case anybody's currently playing through that game. By the way, we reached out to BioPhoenix. He has his own YouTube channel. It's actually larger than ours, and we asked him to come on the podcast. He said he would, but he's currently in the middle of some stuff this month, but probably maybe mid-August timeframe. He said would be good for him. So look forward to that. Moving on, we have Matthew Alder. He says he's regarding some of the comments I was saying about the modding with Final Fantasy VII. He said, I really love some of what the modding community has done with the classic FF games. Changes like the relocalization, rearranged soundtrack, and some balance tweaks can really make a classic game feel fresh and exciting again. If you're looking to play FF9 again, I recommend checking out the FF9 alternate fantasy mod as well. It doesn't do anything like relocalization. I don't feel like FF9 needed it nearly as much as Final Fantasy VII, but it completely overhauls the character's abilities and shifts the balance around. It also makes the game considerably harder. And then he also says, I really can't wait to see how people tweak the gameplay in Final Fantasy 15. The combat in the base game is a little bit of a mess mechanically, so there's a lot of rebalancing that could be done. Like, for example, the magic and summon mechanics need a complete overhaul. I have a few things to say here. First off, I am curious about these Final Fantasy IX mods because Final Fantasy IX is my favorite Final Fantasy game. And I think it'd be really cool to experience that game with a new difficulty. However, given the issues I've had with the Final Fantasy VII modding, granted, I did go all out and I put every single mod I can possibly find on that game. Maybe if I just do like one or two on Final Fantasy IX, it might be a cleaner experience. But I am interested. So thank you for suggesting that.
I would just like a mod where the backgrounds have a better resolution.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking of that too, because the 1080p version of the game has these like high def characters, but then the background, now it looks like paintings. Whereas in the original PlayStation version, the character models gelled a lot cleaner with the backgrounds. It didn't seem like they were just walking on a painting. So I don't know how difficult that would be, because I feel like they would have to go through and like with each area and like redo the background completely.
Yeah, they would have to go through each background frame and redo their resolution. And on top of that, there are multiple frames to one frame, because sometimes there's things like you press like say there's like a bucket on the ground and you can hit a switch and the bucket will come up, and that's a few more frames. So you kind of have to do a resolution frame increase for each of that. I think someone who's more experienced in it could explain it better to me, but overall it is a lot of work, and I commend anyone who is able to pull that off.
And then I will download it and complain about why it was so difficult to implement. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, if you're able to do all that and you put, your blood, sweat, and tears into it, I definitely appreciate it, especially the fact that, I can go in and just download it and play it and make a game I really like better. But yeah, if they could have something like that. One other thing I'm thinking of, and I think I actually saw a mod out there for this, make the battles go by a little faster, right? That's one of the things with the original game, is that the battle, like the spell animations and stuff, and sometimes it would last 15 or 20 seconds, or the ATB meter would just take forever to fill up, and you'd just be sitting there staring at the other enemy like, why is nobody attacking? If that's kind of relieved a little bit later once you have like auto haste and stuff like that. But if a mod could come through and kind of adjust the speed of the battle system, that would be nice. I know that there's the cheat in the re-release versions that let you do ×2 and ×3, but I don't want it to go that fast, right? I don't want it to be.
That's more of a band-aid than a fix.
Yeah, that's just like, I don't want it. Let's say I'm driving to work and traffic's 20 miles an hour. I want it to be like 60. I don't want to go 400 miles an hour. So just a small adjustment, not crazy. So those would be nice things I would like to see from Final Fantasy 9. And I'm sure there's mods out there that address all these things. But if any of y'all have some suggestions, post in the comments. I'd really appreciate that. But then he also points out for modding with Final Fantasy 15, I've seen a lot of stuff regarding modding with that game. And I am interested to try it out. I'm just waiting on next year's content to come out for Final Fantasy 15, because I'm probably just going to get the Windows version and just jump in to the full thing and kind of re-look at that game again with all the new content. And I do want to jump into the modding as well. I am interested to see how they could adjust the mechanics for the battle system, because as fun as warp striking was in that game, I had a tremendous issue with like he pointed out, the magic and not so much the summon mechanics, but the magic system in general. I was very disappointed that magic was almost useless in that game, because half the time I used any magic, it would like damage my entire party. Gladio would be running around on fire. Like it did not help me at all most of the time. And I know there's items you can get that kind of will relieve that, but all in all, I just used basic attacks, and if I got a summon, I would use that. I didn't really use the magic. I used the link strikes, but I didn't do the magic at all. So if they could rebalance that with a mod somehow, that would be amazing. I don't know how you could redo the summon system, because when you do get the summon, it's pretty much like whatever battle you were in is pretty much over. So I don't know how. I guess they'd have to make it do less damage. And I don't know, because right now it's just like a random number generator or a sequence of events occurs, and then you get to summon when you're in a really dire situation sometimes. And that's really cool. And I understand why they do that, because it is so overpowering. But I don't know really how you could have that same effect and allow you to summon whenever you want. I think that would just destroy the game completely. But the magic system, I totally agree, needs some work. Do you have any thoughts with Final Fantasy 15 and what you would like for modding?
I like the mods where they had Sora, the character swaps, and they had Sora and Dante from Devil May Cry and the White Power Ranger.
And yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. I like the silly stuff like that. But it would be interesting to see how the modding community themselves make a better game than they did.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously I don't think we'd get anything like story related, but I can dream that maybe somehow somebody will be able to mod the story, but obviously that's not going to happen unless you want to read text boxes or something. So, but yeah, I'll definitely check it out. And when I do, I'll let you all know. And if you all have had your own thoughts with modding in Final Fantasy 15 or come across humorous things like Eric pointed out, being able to mod the Power Rangers into the game, let us know. We always like laughing, and we'll check it out here on the podcast. But I think that about wraps us up for this week. Next week, we have, we're going to be playing through Octopath Traveler. Maybe not for I don't know. We haven't decided whether we'll do a full discussion or not, but we'll at least be able to talk about our initial thoughts next week. Don't you think?
Yeah, I think we can at least do an early impression of it, like the first 10 hours, maybe. And maybe do a full discussion if the game is good enough that we don't want to just throw the Switch across the room.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, we'll have to wait and see what goes on with that. If it's really disappointing, we might just move on, because we got other stuff we want to cover, but we might do a full game. But at least next week, we'll talk about our early impressions, and I'm sure we'll have some other topics for you all next week. Thanks for listening. Please hit the subscribe button. If you want the audio only links in the description, and we'll check you out next week. Take it easy, guys.
Take care.